What is up, my dear friends, and welcome back to another episode of Honey, I'm Home, a podcast helping leaders to lead themselves out of the darkness and in their own home so they can experience more life, vitality, happiness in their life, marriages, and relationships. Today, I bring to you someone who I'm very excited to talk with. It's a gentleman that I'm still getting to know, but I know that a lot of people that I know look up to him, trust him, and look often for his advice, his guidance, and his word. Um, and I think that you're going to really benefit from this conversation today, just like myself. And I'm honestly in this conversation, it will serve you, but ultimately I'm looking for it to serve me as well. Because in this conversation that I'm having today with the one and only Mr. Keith Callaway Sr., the founder of K&L Industries and a podcast host of the Greatness from Small Beginnings. What a powerful podcast name that is, my friend. And I'm excited for you guys to dive into this story, and I'm going to uncover and unpack his story as well as help you to understand a little bit more on how we can have successful relationships in our life. Because there's one man that I know that has some authority in this space from just meeting him on a little basis here and there, but understanding him and his wife, man, they have been together a lot longer than I've been alive. That's saying something. And Mr. Keith Callaway, welcome to Honey, I'm Home.
What a privilege. Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Oh, man, I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you've taken the time out of your busy day, as I announced some of your titles: a founder of a company, a podcast host, all of this stuff. You're a father, you are a son of a great father, and you're a husband, and man, so much more that I'm probably even unaware of. But I appreciate you taking your time because I don't take it lightly out of your day to talk to my audience, to share your story of more so your married life is really what I'm very interested in, because I've been happily married. I've been together with my wife since 2017, and we've been married for almost 2 years now. And man, it's been a blissful blessing. And although it's been really good, I also know that there's times of moments of struggle. But if you don't mind, talk to us a little bit about how your story and how long you've been married, and where you were and where you are today. So how long have you guys been married for? Let's start there.
In January, 41 years.
Dude, 41 years.
Yes. So we celebrated 41 years, and
Huh.
the way we celebrate things is odd. That those events, those milestones,
Yeah.
this past Valentine's Day, they don't mean very much to us. But I will say that in the weeks since that anniversary celebration, or the celebration of that, the date passes, I've been able to reflect on the fact that we have a ever ever growing relationship. Like it's becoming sweeter. I don't know how the Bible uses the term, the honey and the honeycomb as perhaps the word picture of what the sweetest possible thing is.
Mm. Yeah.
And recently, she and I had a moment, and I thought, what is sweeter than honey? That was a cool moment for me, because I don't often take the moment to reflect on like how much I love someone, and then what would I describe it as? And in that moment, I thought, what is sweeter than honey? Because this probably is. So anyway, there's a lot to the story. 41 years, there's been some struggles, but today it's good. And I hope that your listeners are hearing that it's possible. More than we got there. Yeah, of course, we've glided through 41 years. No, we've stumbled through a lot of them. And I can, if you choose, I can get into a couple of different spots that were very difficult, but it is sweet. It is sweet now. And
Yeah.
it's partly because we're doing the right things.
Oh
So,
man. Well, that's a big insight there, that there's even potentially right things in a relationship. I don't know that we all know what those right things are, because oftentimes many of us get into a relationship questioning or guessing, how does a relationship work? How are we supposed to treat each other? What am I to do and not to do? What are the boundaries and so on? So I would love to hear, your moments of struggle, because my first big question that I have for you, and selfishly, it's like, I'm not worried myself about the great times that my wife and I have.
mhm.
Now we've been through troubling times to know that this marriage, with the foundation of God, has strength more than, we are overcomers. And because we have committed to one another, there's just no question behind it. When you commit to someone or something, right, there, you can't question whether or not you're going to make it through. But I want to hear, what are some of the moments in your marriage that you felt like a failure? If that is, in 41 years, I'm sure that there's probably a moment or two that you probably felt like the relationship was failing, or that perhaps you felt like a failure yourself as the man within your home. And what are some of the things that you experienced, and maybe even some of the strategies that helped you to overcome those very trialing times? Because that's what we need to learn as a civilization, to understand how to endure those trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
So, if you don't
The,
mind.
yeah, the term you used, I was on a call yesterday, trying to make a decision for my business
Mm.
about a sales training process.
Mhm.
Okay.
Sure.
Very businessy thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a process. And I want, of course, I want the best training for my people, and it's got to fit our culture and whatever. And he asked the question, what does commitment mean to you? Because I think he was trying to get me to sign on the spot.
Gotcha.
And yet I'm committed to talking to my team when there's over a certain dollar in expenditures. And,
Sure.
we have these guidelines, right?
Mm.
These kind of fences that we have in our business. And well, what does commitment mean to you? And I was able to reflect on that for a moment. I answered his question,
Sure.
satisfactory to him, but you used the term commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And commitment is should be, I think, seen as fact.
Mm.
It has very little to do with feeling or the recipient of that commitment. I go back to the biblical term honor.
Mm.
And okay, honor is a term that isn't necessarily biblical, but it's all over the Bible, and it actually is in the Ten Commandments. It's that important.
Mm.
There's only a limited number of words in the Ten Commandments,
Right.
but honor is one of them. Honor your father and mother. And it's the only commandment with a promise. And the
Mm.
promise is that you may live long on the earth. Okay. So obviously, if you honor your father and mother, it does something for you. And as I've dug into what that concept means in regards to that honor, the commitment to honor is that it has almost completely nothing to do with the recipient of the honor.
Mm. Talk about
That,
that.
that, that they, so we talk about respect in our culture as something that is a give and take.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit transactional.
Sure.
You act respectful, you get respect.
Mm.
Or you give me respect, I give you respect. But honor in the biblical sense is basically saying, no, when you talk about honor, you honor the position, you honor that God put them there,
Mm.
perfect or otherwise, and
Mm.
otherwise is always the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. But because of their position,
Mm.
we honor them.
Mm.
That's in a sense what's going on with that the parent thing.
Sure.
Doesn't have anything to do with them being a great parent or even a present parent.
Mm.
It has to do with your position on the honor. If you want straight paths, if you want blessing in your life, the blessing of a long life,
Sure.
and and in the term long life, it means basically a blessed life, happy life.
Mm.
Okay, then that means you honor your parents. You do that. That's what you do. Okay, so translate that to marriage.
Mm.
I heard a reel yesterday real quick that it said if your spouse isn't the most irritating person that you are around regularly, then you're probably not meant to be together.
Oh my God.
Something like that. So I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, that's over
Yeah.
the top. But you know what?
Huh.
I could tell you a whole list of things about my wife,
Mhm.
though our relationship is sweeter than honey, perhaps, that
Mhm.
irritate me and have for decades. And yet, the commitment has overcome, that irritation,
Mhm.
and her commitments and her commitment to growth, which has nothing to do with mine, for
Mhm.
her commitment to growth, then probably the irritations, many of them never go away, but the commitment as it moves forward can make it sweeter. So it's a dichotomy. We're supposed to have tension, and the way you appreciate the fact that the commitment is working and it develops into love, both a feeling love and a factual
Mhm.
walk it out kind of love, it is like the dichotomy is actually what makes it work.
That makes so much sense. I feel like I might not be completely understanding, but I feel like if this is it, I feel like you have to have troubling times. You have to get on each other's nerves. You have to have struggle in the relationship if you're going to prove that you're truly committed. Because is commitment even commitment if everything is just flawless and easy? Does it even test your commitment? I don't even
Yeah.
think you even think about having to commit because of how easy it is. And it's like, man, have you ever heard of the guy by the name of Eric Thomas? He's like known as a hip hop preacher. He's a very powerful speaker. One of his most famous speeches were like, when you want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe, that's when you'll be successful kind of moment, right? I want to share this with you because I think it's kind of in alignment to what you're talking about here. And it's profound. And anytime I handle a moment with a client that's talking to me about their relationship and about giving up, he talks about his story where, and it's you can look up like Eric Thomas, Love is Everything. And he talks about his wife, and his wife was about to leave him. And she drove back to Detroit from like some other like 3 hours away. And she's like, you know, Eric, if you don't, do X, Y, or Z, I'm leaving you. And she ended up getting up and leaving. And he talked about how he was like, you're not going to leave me. I gave too much. I gave too much for you to leave me. And if you're going to leave me, you're going to tell it to me in my face. Tell me that you're going to leave me, but not until I buy you the flowers. There's like, and why that story comes up in my mind, Keith, is because commitment is about being like through all of the ugliness, through all of the irritations, through all of the challenges and struggles, because God help us. No, we've been through them, a few of them our own. Uh, it shows me that I love her so much. I deeply care about her. And without those moments of struggle, right? You don't really prove to yourself whether or not you love them. So you
Mm.
almost have to have struggle in order to know that you actually love them and prove it to yourself like this is my person. So is that kind of what you were saying is talking about? Am I picking it up correctly?
Yeah, I think so. Let me give a story. You
Sure.
mentioned that you'd love to hear about some of our troubles, which is appropriate for the context we're talking about right now. I 100% understand why you're asking. So there's two times in our marriage that were our worst.
Hmm.
Year 5
Hmm.
uh, and year 38. Isn't that surprising? Everybody I say that to raises their eyebrows and says, "Wait, you've been married 41 years. So recently
Hmm. Yeah.
you had what you call your top two hard times?"
Right.
Right. Okay. So the reason that I need to share in regards to commitment is the first one, year 5, we had a bunch of kids real quick. Her body was beginning to be stressed.
Mm.
Okay, so she had anemia. We had kid number 4 in 5.5 years of marriage. I was trying to run a business. I'm not a great businessman by nature. Okay, so that all plays in. We have responsibilities, of course, at home, business, church. We always served. This is what we've done since we got married, the day we got married, practically. And this is all good. This is all part of our rhythm, and these are all good things. But during that time in year 5, and it lasted, give or take, 9 months or so. I'll get to that or so part and why it's or so. Uh, what we the commitment overcame that time for us. We were inexperienced, okay, but the commitment was solid. So the way we talk about it now, if we're going to take that year and boil it down into a few sentences, we say, well, we didn't like each other. The commitment created a love, but emotionally we didn't really love each other. But I kept coming home after work, and she kept being there when I got there.
Mm.
So that's how
Wow.
we boil it down.
Yeah.
Okay. So the commitment overrode the other
Mm.
possibilities in our life. Did I have to come home? Like, I've never been a guy to go to bars, but I could have found something to do other than come home, right?
Sure, especially in those difficult times.
Yes, of course.
Probably
And
hard for you to go
yeah,
home.
yeah, it was terrible.
Sure.
I knew that she would rather pull my head off and spit down my neck. I knew that. I knew what I was going home to.
Mm.
Unhappiness, lack of peace, and those things are important to me. I want those in my house,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't have them in my house. But I kept going home, and she kept staying there and being there when I came home. And then eventually that disdain for the situation, not for the marriage, but for the people involved in the marriage, one to each other,
Mm-hmm.
it eventually just the commitment made it go away. There was no magic pill, there was no counseling, there was nothing that we did specifically that made that time better. But eventually, doing the small acts of coming home, and her body started getting in better position. That's some of what happened. She
Sure.
was less grumpy, some probably,
Mm.
but there was no magic bullet. There was no pill we took. There was no counseling we went to that
Wow.
made it better. We just stayed committed, and it got better.
Wow.
Okay.
That's
So
huge.
the important part of this story is at year 38, we worked together for the last 10 years within the business. We've been working together side by side, the business, until about a month from now. We're moving into another building, the business is, but it's been in our house for 40 years. We got up to 52 people in our business, and we've had people meeting. Just before I got on with you, there was a meeting right above me. 12,
Wow.
12 people in our dining room.
Wow.
Okay, so this is how we've operated for years. So at year 38, we're up to 35, almost 40 people, and we can't get away from the business and each other, and we can't have any time alone or any brain time, any heart time. And to be honest, I took it for granted, and I business is always kind of hard. There's a hard element to it. You have to work. It's actually work. My dad used to say, work is a 4-letter word. It's one of those, it's one of those things that you don't necessarily want to do, but you have to do. And so we connected on business, but we didn't connect, and I stopped pursuing her. So one of the hallmarks in our marriage, in our relationship, is that I've found ways over the year to physically, like, to demonstrate the fact that I adore her.
Mm.
Okay, so I think everybody listening should choose a word. What's my word? Not who's my person. What's my word for that person? What do I know that if I do that thing, or if I am that person for her, then she's going to be at least okay.
Hmm.
For me, it's always she needed me to adore her. So at year 38, something happened between me and another employee, and it brought up all this stuff from our past, literally, that happened about a year before we got married.
Hmm.
So almost 40 years in the past, something comes up, something that I had said, something that was actually taken out of context in her heart, and it had been there for 40 years.
Wow.
And I didn't know about it. And and at that time I was not pursuing her. I was not adoring her, because the whole situation was quite irritating to me. That I did something 40 years ago that there's, of course, you can't go fix that. I can't even I can't even legitimately apologize for it, because I was a different person then.
Right.
That was actually a different person that said those harmful things and that had the actions that back that up.
Mm.
And then I realized that that same person with the lack of immaturity was the one that wasn't adoring her and pursuing her.
He came back.
He came back.
Hmm.
And another phrase that we like using, but it's a phrase of potential tragedy, is that we are literally 2 decisions away at any moment from complete disaster. In
Wow.
your marriage, Tyler, you are just 2 decisions away from what you want the least in your marriage. Your first decision would be compromise. Your second would be acting upon that mental compromise.
Mm. That's
Now, it's
huge.
probably going to take a series of decisions to get there,
Sure.
but the big decisions that create the possibility of compromise in your life, and then you acting upon that compromise, you are just 2 decisions away from disaster.
So, so how do I stop myself from being getting myself there? Like, because it sounds like it's like 2 decisions away. The first, the compromise. So that, let's say we have a compromise thought. And in this day and age, in my age, there's social media, and in that is temptations that I talk about all the time to other men.
Yeah.
It's easy to allow your eyes to wander. It's too, like, I don't even know how women end up on my page. And like, and my wife and I have talked about it, but I feel secure in my marriage. She feels secure in in our marriage. And it's like, but like these seeds are planted day in, day out, day in, day out. So like, through consistency, right? Um, been a big conversation with my men's group. It's like, hey, how do we stay faithful, right? Like, that you should always ask yourself that. I don't care how faithful you are. You should always ask, how can I continue to stay faithful in a tempted world wanting us to rot at our core, and lose the battles? So how do I stop myself? How can other individuals stop themselves from ruining their entire relationships due to those 2 decisions that you just discussed? Like, what can I do? What advice would you give to me?
Well, something that I've had to deal with lately that I think speaks to this is that I believe the issue is curiosity.
Hmm.
For me, when I've stumbled, and you mentioned guys my age, social media, how these girls end up on your feed. It's not just your age.
Sure. Yeah.
So let me give some insight into the 60-year-old world.
Please.
I'm 60 this year. Okay. ED, erectile dysfunction. Okay. Let's just get right to it.
Sure.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a thing that's out there.
Mm.
And I'm curious about that. So, and I'm 60.
Mm.
Those two things together put that on my feed all the time.
Of course.
If I speak about it near my phone,
Boom. Every time.
boom, it's there. It's all over.
It'll be,
And let me tell you, the solutions to these problems that they present on these lead magnets
yeah,
are pornographic.
of course they are.
So that curiosity of whether I have the issue, the problem, or whatever, but
Sure.
so I want to
It's there.
be a man for my wife in every possible way, including that way.
Yeah. Amen.
Okay. And so does every man listening.
Mm-hmm.
And some don't even have wives, but they want to be a man in that way.
Oh, so true.
It's so true, right?
So true.
So my curiosity is the pathway to my compromise on that subject, because I want to know, how do I stay healthy in that part of my being, okay, that part of my body. How do I stay vibrant for my wife, right?
Right.
How do I do that? Well, I'm curious to know the answer to that. But if I'm too curious, the enemy of my soul, the devil, is providing the answers that are counterfeit. But my soul wants answers. It doesn't care if it's counterfeit.
Wow. That curi hmm. There's so much I want to speak on that. The curiosity, man. It is the very thing that destroys marriages, it destroys homes, it destroys relationships. It's the temptation, the curiosity, like the grass is greener on the other side. The uh it's better to make I wish I was living in their shoes because they make more money. Whatever the curiosity is, right? Whatever the high is, whatever the drive is.
It
But
doesn't matter. It
it
doesn't
doesn't
matter what it is.
doesn't matter.
The enemy of our souls knows
Hmm.
he knows where curiosity takes people,
Yeah. Makes
and
bad decisions.
it leads us to compromise.
Yeah.
Then that then can lead to answers, potential answers, the wrong answers. Let's talk
Yeah.
about truth for a minute, the untruthful answers, and yet to our soul wants an answer, that needs an answer. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it's counterfeit.
True. Because if it gets its answer, right? If there's a temporary fulfillment to that answer, which unlocks a floodgate of, oh boy, problems,
Decisions. Then you
decisions.
make decisions. You
Yes.
action upon the answers that the curiosity created.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would love to hear a little bit about like, so you've taken us through, I'd love to hear, you talked about your 41 years of marriage and you've had two significant years in your marriage and the defining, principle to that. One in this conversation has been the word commitment and how powerful commitment truly is, because it even triumphs love at times. At least in your story, it has. Staying committed, and what does that mean? What does that look like? What does that feel like? What are the actions behind that prove to not only me but my wife that says like I'm committed? I just wanted you to talk a little bit about, you know, what it looks like to be, and these are tough conversations for a lot of people that are fearful, I think, to open up and ask these questions. But like, as a straight male, in my uh household, how, and with masculinity always being attacked in this world, um, I'm a people pleaser, so I don't want to cause too much disruption. Uh,
Mhm.
I don't want to cause too much panic. I don't want to cause too much hurt, harm within other people. So I try to keep to myself and talk about things that are more comfortable than uncomfortable. But this year, with throughout the help of Brian, it pushing me to open up some of the floodgates that I should be talking about. I do want to talk about, you know, as a man and that runs a successful family. And what I mean by that is you're not a quitter. I think every person that doesn't quit is my ideal of success. As long as you don't quit, you're going to be successful. I don't care what it's in. I just know that if you don't quit, then what? Everything, if both parties don't quit, then what? So I want to hear from you. I think values probably play. Is it okay for me to say that values play an important role in your business?
Oh,
Core
yes.
values. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
How important is it to have core values in your household? And do they differ from your household to your business? Or are they pretty in alignment to the same? Like, I just feel like not a lot of households have values. Families don't have core values to like live by and to be like, this is who the Callaways are. This is what we stand for. And we do not try to navigate away. How
Hmm.
important, if you have those, how important have they been? And I would like to hear a few of yours if you do have those.
I could actually get pretty tactical with you right now because literally sitting right next to me is my documents because
Hmm.
I just shared them with somebody right before I got on with you
Wow. Hey, check it out.
about my family core values and my personal core values. And I asked that person, have you ever, I understand your company has them. Mine has for years. And they're based on me and how I operate.
Sure. As
They're
they should be.
more actually the core values of my company are literally, even though they're from our heart, they're more operational.
Mm,
It's what we do. It's how we live out our cause,
mm,
basically. It's a company. But when you talk about personal core values, uh, I'll just
please.
I'll just mention them. Yeah. So let's see if I can get. I didn't know we were headed here, but awesome. It's great.
Yeah, because it's something I've been diving into myself. Like, I want my family to start having strong core values and a conversation that I think can help our marriage just continue to thrive. Like, our marriage is great, but it can get always better. So I think implementing some core family values is something that I'm curious about, and the correlation between having those and also having a successful marriage, which is staying together happily and fulfilled.
Yeah. So the family core values, I I just a little over a year ago put a document together describing, and of course, my kids are all grown.
Mm,
My youngest is 28,
gotcha.
almost 28. And so I'm not going to tell them. Like I'll tell them what I think they are, right? But I'm also not going to say for your individual families, you probably need to add to this.
Sure. Makes sense.
So, but I have presented it and and I've told them very clearly, this is a starting place. And it actually takes, I used a template that someone else gave me and it has a bunch of interaction in the document. So this is not this, it takes a while to get to the point where you're really honing in on it. But for my family,
Hmm.
the core values are a culture of greatness. Okay.
Mm,
A, a culture of generational legacy.
mm.
So you just imagine what those two things mean, you know.
Greatness and
They can
legacy.
mean a lot of different things for different families, but essentially they mean that we're thoughtful about
Hmm.
who we are and what we're doing. Another one is uh we have a culture of honor. So the word that we talked about earlier, the reason that I can talk with some level of authority on that word is because I've spent decades trying to figure out what it means as we walk it out. And what I'm learning today is, what does it mean to walk out greatness? The greatness that God meant for me when he created me millennia before I was on this earth. He created me in his mind and put me in this century. Well, if he did that, then he didn't do that for no reason.
Sure.
He put you here, for any of the listeners here, for no reason. He did it for a reason. So that means, well, why do you do that? So that's why the culture of greatness was one of my family core values, is because I, as the father of my children and now grandfather of my grandchildren, I look out and I say, oh, that little girl is a world changer. I see it in her. Right.
Wow.
But
Right.
if I don't ever present this as saying, this is who we are, then her identity could perhaps be stunted, because she may not realize, unless I tell her, unless we tell her, that you actually have a whole group of people that see that in you and have created possibility for you.
That's true. Or even without that set of direction, easily get lost and adopt some corrupt values or identity that, are people are living without thought, meaning they're not being intentional about who they want to be, how they want to show up, who they are, and which then causes other people to have the authority to speak into their life, telling them who they are, because no one in their family ever told them who they are and what we stand for. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, if I had that growing up, I feel like, I'd be more confident in who I am even to this very day. But I had to learn that myself, that I had to rewrite the story in my own head, Keith, that told me that, let's just say that in every definition, I'm broken. In every definition of brokenness, that's what I am. And then I have reinforced friends, quote unquote friends, and coworkers, you name it, people that want to speak that same correlated thought into my mind that proves that I'm broken, right? So it's like, oh, well, then I must be broken, right? But because I've never created a value to stand for, or an identity that I fight for, that I try to think about daily, I easily got lost, and I waited for other people to tell me who I am, and that hurt. So it's like,
Right.
having that, man,
Yes.
good for
And so
you.
it's important to so if you develop that for your wife and your kids, then
Mm-hmm.
now you're telling them, this is who you are,
Yeah,
because we are this,
we are
not because
this.
you alone are this, because we are this.
Unity and unity, man. I mean, empower in that, and speaking that life into my family. And it feels like the responsibility of the father or of the husband in the home is to bring that identity to the home, and a true leader leads from the front and thinks about these things, right? And so, I know we're wrapping up here on time, and there's so much we're going to talk about, man. This is not the last time, I should say. This is the first, but not the last, that I want to hold these conversations with you, to speak into my life, sharing it with my audience, and then into my marriage, because I know that you're one of those voices that I do want to listen to, that I want to hear a lot about. But before I ask one of the final questions, is there anything that you feel called to speak on that you'd like to continue talking about, before I ask some of the final questions? Any
Two
message you'd like
things,
to
two
share?
things, and
Yeah.
I think I can keep them fairly brief.
Oh.
Is that part of this process of figuring out my family core values
Okay.
was me figuring out who I am,
Mhm.
what's important to me operationally, like your values are what you act upon naturally, based on your experience, based on your input. And so let me just read the titles of those, okay? And again, this isn't bragging. This is just me honing it down to say, and this is the things that are important to me. And if I don't live this way, I'm hypocritical to myself. which
Mm.
I don't like that. I'm not going to live with that.
Right.
So I value abiding with God.
Mm.
There's a reason I could spend 10 minutes on talking about the term abiding,
Mm.
but it's living within, basically. I value abiding with God. I value abiding with my wife and family.
Mm. Mm.
I value getting and giving wisdom. I value coaching, teaching people things that it's beyond just the wisdom, but it's tactical.
Mm.
Of course, wisdom has its tactical side, but in this world, the Bible, the author of wisdom, doesn't give us all the tactics of how we deal with social media. Sorry, folks, that's not in the Bible. The principles are there. So I love teaching and coaching. That's one of my core values. If I don't get to give, I end up feeling tight, like I'm over full.
Mm.
So anyway,
I love that.
so just to finish our conversation on the core values, I'm telling you, I only started on this a year and a half ago. And I wish it had been decades ago. It would have clarified a lot of decisions I'd have made through my life.
Yeah, that's what that's what I was looking to hear. It's why should someone, why should, even if you're single or married, it doesn't matter. Like everybody needs some values, some direction in their life so that people don't continue to walk in their life and tell you who they think you are, because truth be told, I am not who people say that I am.
Right.
The good and the bad. It's up to me and my personal uh perspective, regardless of, if you're religious or not. Like I know you are, Keith, but I'm just the broad audience. I've been finding a lot of peace with who God says that I am, as a husband and as a son. And so I've been finding a lot of clarity there. And I think values, man, it's what are missing in family dynamics to keep the unity. And it's in its own way, it's tribal. Like it's like I stand for this. Like tribal is like we are here together. Like I've got your back, you've got my back, dude. There's some communities out there that are, indigenous people that literally cut, their hands of blood to like mix the two to unite, that we are bonded together. There are, rituals of unity that we don't have outside of, our marriage vows, that it's like to remember who the Strattons are, who the Callaways are, who the Hesses are, who the Candelors are, these individuals. I don't legacy. You talked about it. I don't want that legacy to die, ever. I want it to be something that withstands at least my length of time, a little bit longer than, what I have here on earth. So one of the final questions that, you know, I feel like you could also speak on, because in this world, I think a lot of people experience a sense of loneliness. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be some sort of its own pandemic. Everyone's chasing something to distract themselves from the internal chaos
Mm-hmm.
that they're currently experiencing. So, my question that I'd like to ask you is, what advice would you give to singles or couples looking to build stronger foundations for a lasting and fulfilling relationship with themselves and with others? What are some foundational principles that they can start to think about or add into their life that can help them develop a more fulfilled and lasting relationship?
You can have a healthy relationship between two imperfect people. It's obvious that if both are trying, then the relationship has, almost an inherent success, right?
Sure.
And yet the function of the relationship can still, let's say a marriage, can still function if someone is at 10% and another is at 90. You just need to fill the cup to 100 somehow. It's still possible to make it work.
Sure.
And we do that as husband and wife anyway. We do play off of each other. There's moments when I'm weak and she's strong, and the opposite is true often. I came across something the other day that to finish up, I'll read, and then I'll get to the actual answer of your question.
No worries.
Okay. The 5 myths about getting happiness. I just came across this the other day. It says that you're enough. Well, guess what? In regards to happiness and blessedness, you're not enough. You're not. Another myth, you're perfect the way you are. You're not. Another, you get to determine your own truth. That's a myth. That's wrong. You deserve to get your dreams. And the last one on these 5 at least is you can't love other people until you love yourself. So having said those, we could do 10 minutes at least on each of those, right?
100%.
Okay.
Oh, for sure.
So we're going to have to leave that be. But let me tell you why this resonates with me. Because if we have big questions like you just asked, is how do we do this?
Yeah.
Kind of where do I start? When I was 28 years old, I was on my heels in every way of my life. I had just finished that year 5, not long before, a couple years before that, and was on my heels. What good is an athlete on their heels? They're good to nobody. They might as well not be on the field or on the court. They're good to nobody.
True.
I was on my heels in my marriage, as a parent, as a business owner. The service I gave to my church, I was always going halfway, because I couldn't give it all. I didn't have anything else. That time of crisis is kind of a bit of a long story, a personal story, but essentially what happened is I had to come to a moment of crisis between God and I. He and I had a lot of conversations about, well, where do I get the answers? It's like every area I'm failing. Not so bad that I'm not showing up, but I'm just not succeeding. There's no blessing in the areas that there needs to be blessing, which is these big areas. And what ended up coming out of that is that I realized that what I needed is wisdom. I went to Solomon. God said, I'll give you anything you want. He asked for wisdom. He became the wisest man in the world and wrote a big portion of the Bible and gave us all advice on life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. He wrote most of the Proverbs and is spoken of highly in the other areas. He's the wisest man in the world. The Bible says that, right? I say, well, what I think I need is wisdom. Where am I going to find wisdom? Well, I need to find it by reading the wisest man in the world and the others that I know are wise. So I need to go to the Bible. So 33 years ago, plus now, I committed to every day the rest of my life searching out some wisdom. Now, it could mean all the way from 1 minute to an hour.
Sure.
But the idea was the term that me and God used, I'm going to open the book.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to open the book every day the rest of my life. I've missed about 100
Sure.
in 30, almost 33 years. That's not me bragging. That's coming from a place of desperation. So when your listeners ask, where do I get the answers to the things that I'm going through in my life? The answer is the author of the answer, the author of the truth, the author of the wisdom. And who's the author of the wisdom? Who's the author of the truth you need? Who's the author of even the tactics that it takes to do good in relationships and in business and all those things? Who's the author of all that? Well, it's God himself. He shared it in his book.
Mm.
66 books put together, 38 authors or whatever it was, and they don't conflict with each other. That's the wisdom I would share with anybody else, is to go find wisdom, find it there first. There are people that teach on that, but always turn that direction as the rhythm in your life. Will that end up without year 38 being a stressful year? No, it won't. But you know what? Year 38 looked different than year 5, because I was confident in those years of saying, okay, I trust now. After all these years, it didn't take that long. I trust now that the author of the wisdom's got me.
That's huge, man. That I've heard it so many different ways. I've heard God has my back, the universe has my back. I've heard, Jesus has my back. It's like investing your time into the author of the answer. It's such a profound insight. And I accept that. I do, because I do it every day too. Or, excuse me, trying to be more realistic with my words. I do it at least Monday through Friday, because I have a habit built into coming into the office, and then for the first 15 minutes opening up the book, the Bible.
Mhm.
And so like that habit's really religiously built into my daily routine. And so, Keith, I feel like we could honestly talk for another hour. I just want to be very respectful of your time. I appreciate uh, you sharing that in your marriage, there were two defining difficult times. You've committed to your wife, and I learned that commitment can be greater than love, and love isn't everything that you need. Sometimes it's just showing up. I learned that if you feel lost, seek the answers from the man who created answers. I feel like I've learned a lot that, you know, you can't love yourself, or you can't love someone until you love yourself. That's profound, because you're right. That's my story. I thought I had to love myself prior to loving the person I fell in love with. It was, and
But let me back up and say that that actually is a myth.
yes, well, no, that is the myth.
It is the myth, and
Yeah,
we need to act love. And to be love, we have to actually act it, because we don't know how to do it. By nature, we don't know how to do it. We got to go act it.
for sure.
Then all of a sudden, we begin to resonate. Oh, that actually worked. Oh, guess what? That made me feel. Yeah,
Mm.
well, guess what? That made me understand. Guess what? That actually livens me up for the next act.
It's profound, and it's very true. And next time I'm when I invite you back on, I want to talk about the five myths to happiness with you, because we could spend 50 minutes just on that alone, an hour on that alone, completely, because they are myths, and it's what the world is selling people right now. And it's not what I believe to be true either. And that's what I'm saying. Like I didn't love myself when I found the love of my life. She loved me, which helped me to actually love me. She introduced me again to God, who I found loved me too. So it was just that. I didn't love me, and I don't know if I ever will truly love me. And I know I'll never be enough, because God told me I by myself am not enough. That's why we need who we need. So, Keith, I want us to say once again, thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom with the world. I know that the amount of listeners that we have here in this community are going to find something that they can take away from this to improve their life, their relationships, and finding greater success and happiness within themselves. And um, where, before I let you go, where can they find you online? I'm big on making sure that you get the respect that you deserve, because you post daily. I see you all the time come up on my feed, and you post truth, you post wisdom, you post knowledge, and I want to acknowledge you for putting yourself out there. Because there's a lot of, and age is just a number, but there's a lot of 60-year-olds that are not willing to step in front of a camera, even with their family. They don't like taking pictures. They don't like showing up, all of that. So I acknowledge you for the courage that you have to continue to show up, because it's not normal whatsoever, but you've made it normal, and you're sharing some great wisdom. So where can we find you at to continue to follow your journey and your wisdom?
Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. There's
Hmm.
quite a bit there now. Thankfully, I
Yeah.
have help.
Yeah.
I
Sure you
found
do.
some help.
Yes, you
Keith
did.
L. Calloway is the best way to find me. Uh,
Awesome.
any of those platforms, you have to format it a little bit different, but you look for Keith L. Calloway and it's there. Yeah, there's a lot on Instagram
Yes. There's a
over the
lot.
last 2 years. There's a lot there.
Yeah. You've been crushing it.
And then the podcasts, of course, it's on the normal channels, but YouTube's the best way to find it, I think. So
Sure. Yeah, we'll make sure we drive some listeners over there as well, and I'll be sure to link up all of your information in the show notes below. So, my dear friend, thank you for being on the Honey I'm Home podcast. For those of you that are still here, be sure to share this out with a family or friend if you found this podcast helpful, supportive, encouraging, and/or uplifting. And do me a solid favor: in order for you to leave the impact that I know that you can, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to the podcast at, because that's what helps this podcast reach more homes and more hearts. I am Tyler Joe Stratton, and this is Honey, I'm Home.